So today I watched an episode of The Happy Console Gamer entitled, Is Zelda an RPG? I've never stopped to think about what I would classify Zelda as. When I think about role-playing games, I mostly think about my early days playing Nintendo, playing Dragon Warrior. So I immediately decided to do some old-fashioned research on the topic. And after reviewing several books, I started to get a little distracted.
Man, Major Blood is badass.
So after my distraction, I decided the easiest way to do this would be to check Wikipedia. So I immediately went to Wikipedia and typed in The Legend of Zelda. And directly in the first section, it classified The Legend of Zelda as an action-adventure game. Case closed. Or is it? To be honest, I wasn't very happy with the classification for Zelda that Wikipedia provided, because it didn't really give any example as why Zelda would be only considered an action-adventure game. So I decided to reference Wikipedia again for role-playing game. Wikipedia classifies role-playing games as a video game genre, where the player controls a character and lives as this character when immersed in a fictional world. Isn't this what we're doing when we play The Legend of Zelda? Aren't we all becoming Link? Sharing his adventure? Saving the world? But to further explore whether or not The Legend of Zelda can be classified as a role-playing game, it's important to look at the generally accepted characteristics of a role-playing game. The first of which is the story and setting. The premise of most role-playing games tasks the player with saving the world, or whichever level of society is threatened. This is a definite check for The Legend of Zelda, as in every quest, you have to save the world of Hyrule, save the princess, and defeat Ganon, or one of a host of baddies. The second characteristic is exploration and quests. Exploring the world is an important aspect of all RPGs. Players will walk through, talking to non-player characters, picking up objects, and avoiding traps. This is a basic element in every role-playing game, and can be traced back to the original Legend of Zelda. Items in inventory. Players can find loot throughout the game world and collect it, such as clothing, weapons, and armor. In the original Legend of Zelda, you could change your clothes for armor multiple times that would increase your durability during combat. You'd also have the ability to collect different swords throughout the game, such as the Master Sword, that would improve the amount of damage done to each of the enemies. Combat. Older games often separated combat into its own mode of gameplay, distinct from exploring the game world. Some games, especially earlier video games, generate battles from random encounters. More modern RPGs are more likely to have persistent, wandering monsters that move about the game world independently of the player. Isn't it a little bit ironic that the formula they're using for modern RPGs was first seen in the original Legend of Zelda? In a classical turn-based system, only one character may act at a time. All other characters remain still. In Zelda, you only play as one character, so the party system does not come into effect. Tracing back to the original Dragon Warrior, where you only played as a sole adventurer exploring the world, they still used a turn-based combat system. Zelda operates on a more action-based combat system, reminiscent to great Super Nintendo RPGs such as Secret of Mana and Secret of Evermore. Experience and levels. Although the characterization of the game's avatar will develop through storytelling, characters may also become more functionally powerful by gaining new skills, weapons, and magic. Most people will automatically eliminate The Legend of Zelda from the classification of a role-playing game because, historically, you do not gain experience and level up. outside of Zelda 2: The Adventure of Link. However, based on this definition from Wikipedia, I want you to take a look back at the original Legend of Zelda. In the original Legend of Zelda, you could gain new clothing and armor throughout the game that would improve your protection against damage from enemies. You would also have the ability to gain new weapons that inflicted a greater amount of damage to the enemies encountered. And last but not least, although there are no experience in levels, you do have the ability to improve your hit points by collecting hearts. The more hearts you collected by finishing levels and finding them randomly throughout the world meant you could sustain a greater amount of damage as the enemies became more difficult while you progressed through the game. While after watching this video, you still may not want to classify The Legend of Zelda as an RPG, I would ask you to take into consideration the original game and how many elements of that game appear in modern RPGs today. Many of the elements became a staple that were invented in the original Legend of Zelda. You can classify The Legend of Zelda as an action-adventure game, or you can classify The Legend of Zelda as an action-RPG game. Regardless of which way you classify it, you have to appreciate each unique adventure as it is. At its core, it is a great adventure, and one that I wish you would all take.